been a lot of talks and a lot of buzz recently around the Scarlet and Violet era. But what about the Sword and Shield era, right? We're taking a break for a while about talking about Sword and Shield stuff and just kind of let the market just settle and do its own thing. Rather than keep talking about it, we just let it be and see what's going on. Whilst everybody's focusing on Scarlet and Violet, today we'll be looking at the alt arts and what's been going on in the Sword and Shield era. Now, I did look at the booster boxes maybe about a month ago of the Sword and Shield era, and a lot of them were cooling off. Pretty much all of the big booster boxes that had that big boom that we saw, earlier on this year have kind of just settled, and that's actually pretty good. A lot of them actually started to drop in price as well, which makes it a lot more appealing to pick up, of course. What about the biggest cards in those sets? Because they also did a massive boom. Now, we saw it in Sun and Moon era with the big boom in the alt art, but what about the Sword and Shield? So we did see, obviously, the Moonbryon, the Lugia, and cards like that just shoot up. The Gengar, of course, Giratina, these big alt arts. And a lot of the smaller alt arts in these sets were falling, right? They were basically free falling, while the big chase cards were just getting absolutely pushed the absolute max. So today we're looking at PokeJace.io at these alt arts. So we'll be looking at the raw price, not only just on TCG Player, but across the rest of the market. So places like eBay and Card Market, to get an idea of what has been going on with these alt arts. Is now a good time to pick them up if there's any that you're missing in your collection, because I think the alt arts are just an absolute home run. They're the iconic cards of the Sword and Shield era. So it's been really interesting because for me, right, I don't have a lot of them. Like, I don't have the big top ones. I got a lot of the smaller, cheaper ones. For me, there are still ones that I really want to get hold of, and they were just too expensive, raw or even graded. So now the dust has settled and things are starting to correct itself. We'll be taking a look at the alt arts and kind of going through whether or not they are worth picking up, raw or even graded. Let's jump in. So we're looking at the Silver Tempest today. This is the first one we're looking at, and this set doesn't have a huge amount of alt arts in it. You have the Lugia, the Regidrago, the Unknown, the Alphabet Soup coming in, and I believe there's like one more. I think it's the Skuntank. Yeah, and the Skuntank, right? As you can see, these are really cheap. Just on the surface, Skuntank is a $5 alt art. Not very good here. Then we look at the Unknown. We're looking around $13. Again, not great. And then with Regidrago is just under $20. And then you got the big boy Lugia sitting at $162. So we look at the Lugia today to give us a better idea of what has been going on, of course, with the Lugia. So we could get a 6-month snapshot, which is a good amount of time because that allows us to see where it has grown and kind of, where it's gone, right? Because it did have that boom. So we're going to see the bit of the boom and then the aftermath of the boom. So we got a wide variety of prices from eBay, TCG Player, and Card Market. And then we have all of the PSA prices. So PSA 10, there's over 10,000 of these graded. I'm looking at $357, which is actually relatively good. I think that's a pretty good one. Yes, there is a lot graded, but it's still relatively good. So let's take a look. Ideally, I want to focus on more of the raw cards prices rather than the graded prices. So we look at the raw price. So we've got the TCG Player and the average market price. And like when we looked at a lot of the alt arts, we did see a lot of market manipulation when it came to TCG Player. A lot of the prices were a lot higher. And you did see that, right? TCG Player's in the orange. Earlier on in the year, TCG Player was kind of a bit more expensive than the average market price. But it has leveled out over the last few months. We can see that it has actually, kind of matched each other and gone down. So yes, it is up over the last 6 months, but it has come down from its all-time highs, which is to be expected. Now, when we go across and we look at TCG Player, we get a better idea when we look at the year snapshot of the Lugia. And, as I said before, it has started to come down. It's kind of settling at its new price point, which is good. You could be asking, well, will these cards go back up in price? Yeah, they always have the potential. I mean, investing in single cards is always tricky compared to sealed products. But if you were looking at picking these up just to add into your collection, rather than, looking at it from an invest standpoint, then I think now is a pretty decent time to pick up, a card like the Lugia. Because as you can see, right, it was selling on the $120 mark for the longest time. Then it had that big boom where it nearly reached $230, went up 73%, which is very, very impressive. But then it's gone from $230 down to $160. So it's fallen about 40 to 50% from its all-time high. That's quite a substantial drop. So yeah, the Lugia is definitely one which I think is a pretty steady price point to pick up. Next, we have Lost Origin. Of course, we have the Gutina, which is sitting at a hefty $340, which is absolutely crazy. Other alt arts in the set, you got the Aerodactyl, which is another pretty good alt art, sitting at $100. You got the Rotom at $37, and then you got the Galarian Berserker at $17. I believe that's all of them. Again, it's just a very small amount of alt arts in this set. Yeah, I think that's all there is. So, very small amount of alt arts in this set. Gutina, Aerodactyl, really holding the fort, pushing things along. The Rotom's kind of holding out there, to be honest. You know, the fact it's more than the Pikachu and the rest of the other cards in the set. Same with the Galarian Berserker. They have dropped, though. So they have gone a lot cheaper. But let's take a look at the big boy Giratina. So obviously this is still very expensive, over $300. So eBay $300, TCG Player $340, Card Market pushing $400, which is pretty insane. A lot less of these in the PSA 10 compared to Lugia, half the amount, right? Probably because this card's a lot harder to pull. So there's just a lot less Giratinas out there to get graded, let alone getting them in a 10. We're looking at nearly $700 in a 10, which is very, very impressive. Again, as you can see from the graph over the past 6 months, the graded price has fallen quite a bit. That's the thing that jumped out to me straight away. I mean, it's pretty much where it was 6 months ago, from its all-time high of $950, which is crazy. But we're looking at the raw price today, so let's look at the raw price. So we look at the raw price of this one. TCG Player, you know, a bit different than the Lugia, has been above the average market price. Bearing in mind, the average market price, look at that card market price, you know, nearly $400. TCG's Player still being higher than that across the average. And it's quite interesting, but it has fallen, you know, quite a bit actually. So we go back and it's nearly the same as it was 6 months ago. So we're looking at this, right? So $300, it was at that high point here, and nearly $500 on TCG Player. So that's really interesting to see that the Giratina, even though it's still really tough to pull, the prices are still dropping. Then we take a look at TCG Player to see what's been going on of a wider snapshot. So we've got the 6 month, 3 month mark, 6 month mark. We're going back to the year so we can see the big broader picture here. So overall on the year, it's up 23%, which is still pretty good. And I think it could fall. You know, as you can see, it's going this downward trend, and it has been for the last few months. But it has fallen from its all-time high. So it went around 230, 240, up to that nearly 500 that we just talked about, and it went up 81%. Then it's gone from 81% down to 23, 24%. So it's dropped nearly 60% from its all-time high, which is, again, crazy to think, because it's only in a matter of months. It's not like it's been years. So yeah, we're starting to see new prices come for the Giratina. Look, Lost Origin's getting harder and harder to get hold of. It's getting more and more expensive. You know, we're starting to get to the point where, you know, a price of a box is over $200. It's going to be tough to pull. You know, you're talking about a $300 card. It might just be one of these things where, you know, for the price of 1.5 boxes, just to go out and pick up the Giratina for a raw price of $300 seems a lot more appealing. Right, from Lost Origin to Astro Radiance now. Astro Radiance does have a few more alt arts than the previous sets we just looked at. You got the Machamp, which is the most expensive card in the set, $121. Then we got the Palkia sitting at $37, the Dialga sitting at $30, the Beedrill sitting at $27. You got the Sneasler at $24, and you got the Hisuian Lilligant at $11. So I believe the Hisuian Lilligant is the cheapest, and you got a bunch of rainbow as well. Okay, so out of the alt arts, you got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You got a few more than the others. In my opinion, I think the artwork of this set is incredible, but the alt arts, you look at the Palkia, the Dialga, and the Beedrill, they are not really moving much. I remember these cards, especially the Palkia and the Dialga, being $40, $50 cards, and they have fallen. But the Machamp, again, seems to be doing relatively well. Astro Radiance is getting more expensive. It is getting a little bit harder to get hold of. It is still cheaper than some of the other sets like Brilliant Stars, Lost Origin, and the like. So the Machamp, look at $120 on eBay, $120 on TCG Player, and $110 on Card Market. So we're looking at a just generally cheaper card than the ones we just looked at, you know, with that Giratina and the Lugia. PSA 10, $250, a lot less grading a PSA 10 than the Giratina and the Lugia, of course. So that's quite interesting. That's probably one of the reasons why the PSA 10 is actually holding relatively well. It is higher than it once was 6 months ago. It hasn't actually dropped a huge amount from its all-time high. But we look at the raw price of this card, so we get rid of the PSA price. Again, TCG Player was pushing the value of this card even higher than the average market price, which is kind of interesting. You know, we saw that like pretty much over the past 12 months that TCG Player has just been a bit dodgy when it comes to card valuations compared to the rest of the market, but they seem to have leveled out. You know, literally they've neck and neck now, so they leveled out, which is pretty good. But it is, you know, less than its highs, of course. But if you take a look at the average market price of this, so 120, the average highest market price is about 160, so it dropped about $40. You've got a TCG player where it's looking at nearly, you know, 190. That's crazy, you know, so take that in mind. So when we go on TCG player and we look at the Machamp over the last year, well, I mean, last 3 months has dropped 20%. Over the past year, it's still up 36%, again, which is pretty decent. But then we're looking at a card that was around $80, pretty much, reaching as high as the 190, which was what we saw over on PokeJace. And now we're starting to see this card go from 190 down to that 120. So it was at a high of 100%. It doubled its value, which is very impressive. And it's now at 36, which is still really good, but it's dropped over basically 60%, right? It's dropped over 60% in the past, what, since June? So we're looking at, what, 4 months? So in 4 months, it's dropped 60%. That is crazy. That is, you know, and I've just talked about, you know, this card across the board in the average market price hadn't actually dropped that much, but on TCG player, it's dropped quite a lot, going from that 190 down to the 120 compared to the 140, 150. Huge difference. Huge difference. Moving on to Brilliant Stars. I absolutely love Brilliant Stars. We've got the Charizard alt art coming in at $130. I actually, you know, back in the day, I did think this was going to be like the big thing, like the Umbreon, but that hasn't happened. Then you've got the Arceus V sitting at 24. And then after that, we've got the Luminon V, which is further down at $11. We've got the Honchkrow only sitting at $7. And that's pretty much it. I mean, it's got really good trainer gallery, of course, in this set, but not a huge amount of alt arts compared to Astro Radiance, say. So you look at the Arceus V, that has fallen. I remember picking, well, getting one when it was like $40, you know, 40, 45, and that has fallen. You know, the Luminon, the fish, my favorite card in the set, $11. That's just not really worth much. And then the Honchkrow sitting at $7. Pretty poor. So the Charizard is really carrying the set. I mean, of course, you've got some other nice cards, but out of the alt arts, it's carrying the set at 130. Now, Brilliant Stars is a set where it is still has a high price point. I mean, I wouldn't say it's like keeps going up. I mean, you know, it's always been like one of the more expensive sets, you know, in the Sword and Shield era, but hasn't really taken off on that same level as Lost Origin or Fusion Strike or Chilling Rain. So we look at the Charizard, we can see what's been going on here. So we're looking at 125 on eBay, 130 on TCG Player, 200 on Card Market. Huge difference. But we look at the graded, right? $270 in a PSA 10 with nearly 10,000 graded in a 10. So we saw a much smaller amount graded in the Machamp. This is on that same level as the Lugia that we just looked at, you know, and that was about 10,000 or just over 10,000. So the Charizard has been graded a lot, and we can see the reflection in the value of the card. 270, falling from its all-time high at the beginning of the summer at $400. So the PSA 10 has been falling. More of it is clearly getting graded, so keep that in mind. So we look at the raw price of the past 6 months. Again, TCG Player was above the trend of the average market price, which is quite interesting. But here's the thing, it's leveled out. Yeah, we can see the TCG Player ever since middle of July, it is leveled out with the rest of the market, but it has fallen. We look now, 125 on TCG Player in May. We were looking at $200 basically for this card. So it's dropped, what, $80? Yeah, $75, which is quite wild, right? But you look at the rest of the market price, I mean, it was like 170. So it dropped about $50 overall, I would say, of the average market price. So it has fallen quite a bit over the past 6 months. So when we do look at TCG Player, over the past 3 months, it has dropped 18%. If we go back over the past year so we can get a better idea, it's up 15%. So not quite as much as the other arts that we've looked at. It's actually one of the worst performing ones. But it seems to be quite steady over the past, you know, since August, over the past few months of the price. But it did go from $100 up to as high as that $200, which is pretty much double the value. I mean, it's said it's got up by, what was that, like 76%? So from 76% down to 15%, the fact it's dropped again, another card, 60% in a matter of 4 months is absolutely crazy. I highly rate this card. I think it's still one of the nicest cards in the whole of the Sword and Shield era, especially when it comes to Charizard. But it is actually not doing very well. It's actually one of the poorest performing alt arts out of the last 3 sets that we just looked at. Right, moving on to Fusion Strike. Fusion Strike has some big movers. We really have seen Fusion Strike boom. Booster boxes are very expensive. The loose packs aren't that expensive, but the poor rates are so tough in Fusion Strike that trying to get some of these big top alt arts is like next to impossible. So we have the Gengar coming at $300, which is relatively high. And then we've got the Espeon as well at $200, which is another big high card. Then we've got the Mew VMAX just kind of existing at 80. Then you've got the Mew V at 31, so that one has fallen. We've got the Celebi sitting at 28, that's kind of stayed pretty much the same. Inteleon, one that not many people talk about that much, is about $20. Me breakdancing on Saturday night, the Genesect at $13, and then we have the Greedy Greedent coming in at $6. So you've got some really cheap alt arts in the set that have been falling over the past few months. But we're looking at the big top dogs for this one. So we're going to look at the Espeon first, just because it has been moving quite a bit. And it is such a big card. Okay, so let's look at the Espeon here. So we're looking at eBay 215, TCG Player 210, and Card Market again nearing that $300 mark, so quite high on Card Market. PSA 10, $323. That's not great, right? We've seen some of these PSA 10s be a lot more than the raw price. That's not a huge upgrade. $6,500 in a PSA 10, so kind of middle of the road compared to the other arts that we've seen, but overall, not really doing great. So we look at the graded price, and the graded price, of course, is gone down, but it's still kind of up just about where it was 6 months ago, but that's fine. But we want to see the raw price of this Espeon. Now here you can see the manipulation of the market in TCG Player, right? Around the June time, the difference in price on the average market was $230 compared to $340 on TCG Player. So over $100 difference between the two markets, which is pretty wild. However, once again, it is leveled out. In the last month or so, it has leveled out and they're pretty much even. And they were that in the past, but they just had this weird boom during the summer. So overall, when we look at the price of this card, it has gone up over the past 6 months, which is great. But again, if you look at the average market price, right? We look at the average, it hasn't actually fallen that much. It's fallen like $40, $50, right? Compared to the $140 or whatever it is from TCG Player. So this was a card that was definitely manipulated in the past. So here we have it, the Espeon on TCG Player. So over the past 3 months, it's fallen 27%. But let's look over the past year so you guys can really see market manipulation in its process. So you've got $120 for this card, and then we're from $120 to $350, as we can see here, 162%. Everybody was talking about it at the time, like, oh my god, this is absolutely crazy. Over here in the UK, we really didn't see the prices go up that high, like nowhere near. It was just crazy. And so it went up 162%, and now it's gone up by 46% up on the year. So it's fallen 120%. That's crazy. That is absolutely crazy. This card has fallen 120% in 4 months. It goes to show that you need to shop around. Absolutely. But don't always trust TCG Player when it comes to some of these card prices, because this is crazy. This is one of the biggest swingers that we've seen, the biggest price swings that we've seen, in the past 6 months. It's just crazy. Then we look at the big boy Gengar from Fusion Strikes. We got $292 on eBay, $330 on TCG Player, $423 on Card Market. Absolutely crazy. $600 in a PSA 10. That's pretty decent. Over 7,000 PSA 10. I mean, I've never pulled this card in my life. I have no idea. Never held one. Maybe I'll get one myself in the future. Maybe just buy one at PSA 10 if it keeps falling. So it has fallen, like I said, the PSA 10 price from its all-time high. Not by a huge amount, by about $100, which isn't too bad. But we look at the raw price, and again, TCG Player was a little bit above the card, average, market average, and it is leveled out, which is nice to see. But it is a little bit lower than it was 6 months ago, and it has fallen from its all-time high. We're looking around $300 there. Its all-time high is around $400. So it's dropped around about $100, which is actually, a pretty hefty amount. But when we look at the Gengar, so it's gone up ever so slightly over the past 3 months, but over the past year, this card is still up 56%. That's pretty good. But we can see the card went from $185 up to over $400 range. It went up 102%, and now sitting at 56. This one's only dropped about 40%, which is actually not too bad. It's not the Espeon levels, of course. And I think the Gengar will start to bounce back. I mean, it stayed pretty steady over the past few months, which is really interesting to see. And as I said, it's now leveled out with the rest of the market. I would expect this to go up. Nothing like the Espeon. The Espeon was just crazy, but the Gengar has some really good future really moving forward. Right, we're going to look at Evolving Skies. Now, I know there's a lot of, alt arts in Evolving Skies. We're not going to be looking at every single one because they've been moving like absolutely crazy. But of course, we've got the Moonbryon sitting at $950. You've got the Rayquaza VMAX at $400. And of course, the whole load of evolutions with the Leafeon, the Glaceon, the Sylveon. They've all gone down in price. Right, all of the big alt arts in the set have gone down from their all-time highs. They're still, expensive. They're still probably up on the year, but they have all fallen from their all-time highs, including the Umbreon V. Now, when you look at stuff like the Dragonite is actually doing relatively well. The Rayquaza is doing relatively well, and a lot of the smaller alt arts in the set have been pushing upwards. So the big VMAX alt arts have been going down. The small V alt arts have been going up. The Espeon, the Sylveon, the Leafeon, and the Glaceon have all been shifting upwards. And you've got other alt arts. We can't forget about the Noivern sitting at $34. You've got the Golurk sitting at $15. The Duraludon sitting at $17. And the Duraludon V sitting at $10. You've got the Medicham as well sitting at $10. So you do have a lot cheaper ones that aren't evolutions. I mean, Evolving Skies have seen rainbows really climb recently. But the big ones, the big ticket ones, we look at the Rayquaza and the Moonbryon to give us an idea of what's been happening with these big top cards. The Rayquaza VMAX, we're looking at $300 on eBay, $402 on TCG Player, $541 on Card Market. Absolutely wild. Now we're looking at graded prices, again nearly $9,000, quite a lot, $550. Pretty good, if you don't buy it from Card Market, pretty good otherwise. Now the PSA 10 price of this has fallen from its all-time high, but it's up on the past 6 months, which is pretty good. And we look at the raw price of this card, again TCG Player showing the market manipulation was above the average market, but overall hasn't leveled out. We saw a lot of these big old arts and they leveled out recently. This one still hasn't. TCG Player is still above the average market. Bear in mind the market is highly, I say manipulated, but high, from Card Market, whereas TCG Player is a bit weird. So we're looking at really like over $100 gap back in June, and now we're looking at, well, pretty much $100 gap still. Even there, it was like $40-50 gap. So very, very interesting. So we're looking at TCG Player. It's interesting with Evolving Skies because the booster boxes prices are very stagnant. They just sat at 700 and they haven't moved in months. Whereas the alt arts have. So over the past year, the Rayquaza is up on the year, which is very good. It's up nearly 60%. Very, very impressive. We did look at a $250 card and it's now sat at $400. Very good. But then if we look where it once was, it went up 112%. And now gone down to that 58. So again, we look at another card that's dropped by about 60% in the past 4 months, which is absolutely crazy. I do expect this to kind of climb back up because it's Evolving Skies, right? Pretty much everything in Evolving Skies is like money, pretty much as an absolute gold mine. But with booster boxes, I mean, like I say, it's pretty stagnant at the moment with the price of booster boxes. I think a lot of them still being moved around and being sold, mainly because people just want to cash in from when they bought it at a cheaper price. But right now, I think that Rayquaza is doing relatively well, and I think this one will climb in the future. And of course, we're going to talk about the Moonbryon, the most iconic card, not only from the Sword and Shield era, but probably one of the most iconic modern era Pokemon cards. This one here, we're looking at eBay about $800, TCG Player at $950, and Card Market over $1,000. 13,000 or over 13,000 graded in a PSA 10. I have one in a PSA 10. The price of it has fallen a little bit, but there's just so many. But this card is just so iconic that I kind of feel like it doesn't matter how many gets graded in a 10. It really doesn't. So we're looking at 1,270 and a PSA 10 is up on the last 6 months, but has fallen from its all-time high at 1.5, which is still like a $300 price swing. And we can see again TCG Player being above the average market price. It was pretty leveled out here back in August, but they've kind of broke away of recent, and we've seen that over $100 difference between the two markets, which is actually pretty crazy. So when we do look at TCG Player, the Moonbryon has actually gone up 12% over the past 3 months. So it is on the uptick. It is back on the climb. So let's take a look at this. So a year ago, it has gone up by 93%, right? This goes to show how powerful an iconic card is. So we had its pretty much all-time high at $958. And then it started to drop, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute, it's starting to drop. And, $864. So it's dropped you know, basically $100. So it's like, oh, hang on a minute, things are cooling off, the Moonbrion's going down. Nope. It was like, hold my beer, and is now the highest and most expensive it has ever been on TCG Player. To keep that in mind, moving forward, the power of this card, it being iconic, is going to help. And I wouldn't be surprised if it continues going up and reaches $1,000 pretty soon on TCG Player. And even if you look at the other markets, it's pretty much the same. So it all depends on the quality of the card as well, but this is just an absolute juggernaut. Chilling Rain, Chilling Pain, we've got the Blaziken, loads of alt arts in this set, $280. We got the Moltres, $130. You got the Shadow Rider Calyrex, $88. There's quite a lot in this set, right? Now, a lot of the other like non-Blaziken and non-Moltres alt arts have actually been going up. You know, the fact is we've seen the Ice Rider Calyrex go up, we've seen the Shadow Rider Calyrex go up, we've seen the Articuno go up. A lot of these have gone up. The Zora's gone down a little bit, and Rapidash has gone up, and some of the more cheaper alt arts have been shifting upwards as well. Things like the Slowking, the Tornadus, and things like that. So they have been moving upwards, which is actually pretty good to see. And we've also seen some rainbows like the Blaziken go up as well. So Chilling Rain has seen some good movement. Snorlax has been falling. Some of the top alt arts like the Moltres kind of stayed as it is. And let's look at the Blaziken. Right, we're looking at the Flaming Chicken KFC. 276 on eBay, 284 on TCG Player, and 223 on Card Market. 425 in a PSA 10. Not too bad, but not the best. But only 3,500 grading a 10. Tough pull race in Chilling Rain. Really tough. So let's look at this, right? So 425 in a PSA 10 from its all-time high at over $500. So it has been falling in the graded price quite a bit actually. Look at this. TCG Player, once again, being much higher than the average market price. But they've leveled out over the past month, which is really, really interesting to see. The fact is that there was a, what, over $120 gap is now leveled out. So the market is correcting itself with these big money alt arts. Especially in Chilling Rain, things are getting more expensive, getting harder and harder to get hold of. Pull rates are super tough, and you know, it's just difficult, right? So when we look at TCG Player about the Flaming Chicken, it's gone down 18% over the past 3 months. Over the past year, still up 64%, which is very good. Here we saw that big boom of the Blaziken happen. Now it did go from $170 up to as high as what, $405, so it went up by 138%. So from 138% down to 64, it's dropped what, 70%? So this card has dropped 70% in the past 3 months. This is one of the biggest money droppers. Now we saw it obviously with the Espeon. Obviously the Espeon is the most, right? But this is one of the biggest ones as well from, you know, Chilling Rain, the Blaziken. You know, still up by about 64%. I expect it to level out. I expect it to sit and hover around the $250 mark in the future, but it'd be interesting. Chilling Rain booster boxes, again, are pretty stagnant right now. They've been actually dropping in some cases. So overall, I kind of feel like this one will still be a good one, like the Gengar and stuff, but it has fallen quite a bit. And then finally, we've got Battle Styles. I absolutely love Battle Styles, one of my personal favorites of the Sword and Shield era. We got $143 for my Sleepy Boy T-Tar. Then we got the Urshifu at 58. Then we got the other Urshifu at 38. The rest of the arts are pretty poor in this set, right? Empoleon 34, regarding value. I mean, the artwork's amazing. $17 in the other Urshifu, and then we got $13. So pretty low across the board, except my boy T-Tar. So when we look at my boy T-Tar, this guy has been doing pretty well. He has been doing pretty well. $108 on eBay, $143 on TCG Player, $133 on Card Market. PSA 10, $256, which is incredible. I've got one in the PSA 8, trash, right? $70, absolute trash. So again, a really tough card to get graded, tough card to find. We look at the PSA 10 price, we can see there's fallen, you know, $256 from its all-time high of $350, so it's dropped about $100, which is kind of annoying. But then we look at this, again, TCG Player, you know, really far ahead and higher, so 190 compared to 136, so $50-$60 difference. Pretty close now, leveled out somewhat recently. So again, another card that's leveled out. Battle Styles, one of the cheapest booster boxes, probably the cheapest booster box to get in the Sword and Shield era right now. Highly rate picking it up because it is so cheap. The ceiling is going to be a lot lower than the others. But regarding the Tyranitar, again, I think the ceiling is probably going to be much lower on this than some of the other cards that we've looked at. But it is doing pretty well. So when we look at my boy T-Tar, dropped 15% over the past 3 months. Over the past year, it's gone up 37%, right? Hasn't climbed as much as some of the others we've seen, but we've seen it go from an $88 card on TCG Player by, you know, to 186. So it's gone up by $100, it's gone up by 81%. So from 81% down to 37, so it's dropped just under 50% in value from its all-time high. Not quite as bad as some of the others. On average, we've seen today about a 60% drop pretty much across the board, and we've had a few that have been even more. But yeah, again, he's following the trend and he has been falling, but he's been pretty steady recently, you know, over the past few months. So I expect the Tyranitar, again, kind of like the rest of the, you know, seal product as it were, just kind of level out and not really move much. But it might just start to trickle ever so slowly over time, but we'll have to wait and see. So there you have it, guys, a nice in-depth look of the biggest alt arts that we've seen from the Sword and Shield era. Look, you know, booster boxes are pretty stagnant right now. Not much is moving. In fact, a lot of them are falling in price. When we look at these alt arts, you know, again, a lot of them have fallen, you know, from the all-time high. They are all of them, pretty much all of them are up from they were a year ago or even 6 months ago, which is pretty good. But from that all-time high, some of them, you know, dropping 120% like the Espeon, majority of them dropping on average by 60% from their all-time high, makes it very appealing to pick them up. So now's a great time to pick them up. If you had picked them up at their all-time high, you know, 3-4 months ago, it's going to sting. I don't think a lot of them will actually get back up to where they once were. I really don't see it. Some of them, they've dropped maybe 20, 30, 40%. I do see. You know, we've seen the Umbreon break that trend. You know, the Moonbreon's actually the highest it's ever been. It's kind of broken it. But the rest of them, it's going to take time. It really is. You had that hype around it, really drove it and caused the market to go crazy. And that happened with Sun and Moon last year. And a lot of the alt arts in Sun and Moon have corrected themselves. History has repeated itself. It happened in Sun and Moon, and it's happened again with Sword and Shield. You know, I made a video a few months ago, earlier on this year, when the big boom was happening, saying exactly this. I predicted that the alt arts were going to fall, and they have. Yes, they are up on the year. Great. But if you bought in, you know, at that high, it's going to hurt. But now's a great time. A lot of them have settled, been quite steady over the past few months. They may go up, they may go down, but it's definitely a lot cheaper than they were 3-4 months ago. If you've made this far into the video and you've enjoyed it, make sure to smash the like button, make sure to subscribe for more Pokemon content, and let me know your thoughts down in the comments about the alt art. Do you think now's a great time to pick them up? You know, did you think that it was going to go this way? I mean, the signs were there, if you know what I mean. You know, from Sun and Moon, the signs were there. For me, there are a lot of big alt arts that I really want to get because they are cheaper now, which is great. But I think I might try and get them in a PSA 10 already, because I know they got a 10 and I want to have them graded, and the graded prices pretty much across the board for all of them have fallen even over the last 6 months, so keep that one in mind. But that is it from me, guys, in today's video. If you want more Pokemon content, make sure to click the video on the screen, and of course make sure you subscribe for more Pokemon content. And as always, you guys are legends. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.